Hello there and welcome along. The Gardener Ben here with another brand new, fully revised collection for 2025. Now, way back in 2022, I brought you my Best for Shade collection, a very small collection of roses which, in my opinion, are great for growing in fairly decent shade. Now, I get asked this question an awful lot. My inbox is flooded and almost on a daily basis with dozens of messages from people saying I have a north or an east facing aspect in the garden, and sometimes it's a northeast facing aspect in the garden that has fairly decent shade. I'd like to plant a rose in it. And now I'm normally very honest and open with people and say that possibly it is not the greatest place for growing a rose, especially on a north or a east facing wall. However, there are one or two roses that really will actually flourish in quite decent shade. And when we say shade, there are several different aspects that we need to take involved here. And mostly it's the combination between dry and shade that does for most things. So you do need to make sure that if you're growing in a shady location in the garden, either underneath an overhanging tree or in the shade of a building or fence or outbuilding, that you do need to watch your watering, because the combination of dry shade is often what does things in. It's not the light levels, it's often the combination between the two that actually is the killer. When we say shade, we need to be very careful. The roses in this collection all need around 4, 5, or coming on to 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. So we're talking about dappled shade. And some of these roses will actually do better towards 4 more than 6, and some of these roses will do better in towards more the 6 hours of sunlight per day. So as I talk you through the next 20 roses that are all going to appear in this collection in no particular order, I'll make sure that I give you the growing aspect here in the garden and how they thrive with myself. This is a multi-branded video and contains roses from lots of different breeders. So for the first time, I say in 2025, really shaking things up. And these roses will all thrive in between 4 and 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. They will also grow in more sunshine. If you have a location in the garden that gives them more, you just need to be aware that some of them will actually have the color affected. You might get some bleaching out on the colors, and their growing capabilities may be slightly different. However, the biggest thing you need to bear in mind is, say, if you're growing in fairly decent shade in the lull of a tree or in the lull of a building, that you do need to watch your watering. Especially under a tree, you need to make sure you're adding plenty of organic matter to the soil as well, to make sure that the rose has all of the nutritional value it needs, because roses are really deep rooted and very, very hungry and very thirsty. Right, so let's crack into this revised 2025 collection for you. And once again, in no particular order, I'm playing around with the format of these videos. So popping up on the screen for you now should be the very first rose for you, which is from David Austin Roses and is Lady of Shalott. This lovely orange or copper coloured flower flowers really beautifully, receiving around 4 to 5 hours worth of direct sunlight per day. And like many of the roses in this collection, can be grown in several different ways, either as a large, substantial, standalone shrub. I grow mine on an east facing aspect in very, very deep shade. It gets a small pocket of direct sunlight in the very early afternoon as the sun swings round the garden, and it pretty much spends all of its day just in deep shade, so getting 4 hours of direct sunlight per day, and grown as a large substantial shrub where it will really come into its own towards the very, very back end of the season. You can also grow the Lady of Shalott as a small and informal climber. Basically, it's a large shrub with enough vigor to get itself to a small climbing capability, reaching around 8 to 10 feet as a small climber, and again works really nicely on an east or a north facing aspect, but please don't place it on a northeast facing aspect, because it will be far, far too deep shade for it. So the first one in this collection, which should be popping up on the screen now for you, is the Lady of Shalott. The next one, newly revised for 2025, is one from Peter Beale's Roses, is RNLI With Courage. Now, this is a very fabulous rose, reaching very normal sizes around 3 to 3.5 feet, producing a very handsome and mounding shrub with the most beautiful dark emerald green foliage. Now, this is very, very signature Peter Beale's. Great disease resistance, a high gloss on the foliage there, very, very signature with them, as also with the shape of bloom. Now, the petal count on RNLI is actually relatively low, but the way it holds the petals means these petals curl and crinkle ever so slightly, very much like a hybrid tea. And you'll see that central swirl on this bloom here That central swirl in the very center, very hybrid tea-like, and this curling of petals is very similar to that as well, meaning that RNLI looks like it has a much higher petal count than it actually has. It carries flowers in huge, great big sprays, and at this time of year, towards the very end of August and into the beginning of September, producing large canes that come up quite a bit higher than the actual shrub itself, meaning it's very, very useful for planting on the side of a rose arch. And I'm including this one very specifically for this, along with another rose from Peterbilt's, which will be appearing later on in the collection. RNLI, if you wanted to grow it, it's not as a climber, but as a large informal shrub, will send up canes to around 5 feet at this time of year. Now, if you wanted to, you can prune those right out during your autumn and winter pruning, or you can leave those a little bit taller and clad the size of a rose arch or arbor, meaning you've got this beautiful, deep, rich, golden apricot colour all the way up to around 4 to 5 feet, meaning it will flower pretty much floor to ceiling. So, for instance, if you've grown a rose upper arch or an arbor that is then all flowering at the top and you've neglected to train the rose properly, or it's simply got leggy, this is a great substitute for planting in fairly decent shade, receiving 4, 5, 6 hours of direct sunlight per day, but will flower from low levels all the way through to around 5 feet in height. Great disease resistance. It lacks a little bit in the perfume department, but what that it makes up with the sheer amount of flowers it produces and its disease resistance and this wonderful, say, deep, rich emerald green foliage. So, making an appearance on my Best for Shade collection is RNLI With Courage, fully reviewed during the month of June and July in 2025. That personal review, if you're watching alongside or if you're watching along on YouTube, that video will follow in the playlist after this video. Right, next up, a very, very highly rated rose from myself, the fabulous Dannahue from David Austin Roses. In 2024, this rose was ranked well within the top 5 with myself. In the top 50 this year, still ranking very highly, still making it into my brand new top 50 in the top 10. So a fabulous rose. Donna from David Austin Roses getting quite a lot larger than David Austin actually believe it does. Mine stretching well up to an excess of 5, coming onto 6 feet. A very, very substantial, very large and very beefy shrub, sending out huge, very, very thorny canes. So just be aware its thorn count is particularly high. Those couple of points knocked off this year during my top 50 during the new categorization of those roses, meaning it slipped down the ranks ever so slightly because it's very, very high thorn count. Wanted to bring this particular one close to the camera for you because it's its beautiful bronzing and burgundy edges to Dannahue, which really, really set it apart. A lovely open chalice shaped flower in a lovely light apricot colour. Really lovely fragrance, and you can see why David Austin discontinued Jude the Obscure to make this way for this particular rose within their collection, because it is particularly good. This one will start flowering in almost late May and continuously flower all the way through to the very end of November. And actually, in the last 2 years, in 2023 and in 2024, Dannahue was still seen in flower towards the end of December, towards Christmas. An absolutely fabulous rose, and it really has the ability to harvest a huge amount of light. Massive foliage. In the review for this one, you'll see me comparing this to my hands. Now, I've got really quite large hands, but Dannahue produces foliage that is almost 6, 7, coming on 8 inches across. Absolutely massive, and obviously perfect for harvesting sunlight in really deep shade. In fact, mine just receiving around 3 to 4 hours of direct sunlight per day on a northeast facing aspect, grown in a pot. So Dannahue really great for that. And another one that produces unbelievably good hips. So often in flower very, very late in November and producing really nice hips towards the back end of November and into December. So this one is Dannahue. Next up, a rose that was reviewed by myself during 2025 and available from English Roses. This one is called Truly Scrumptious, and truly scrumptious it is. I'm going to bring that close into the camera so you can appreciate this beautiful colour. This lovely antique pink flushed with apricot, that lovely sherbet lemon and yellow there as well. A deep coral pink, and if I turn the flower all the way around, Look at the colour on the back of that. Truly scrumptious is utterly scrumptious. It's a really lovely rose and one of the nicest characteristics, much the same with Dannahue. Not only will this do very well in a pot, but it will also do very well in about 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight per day, which also protects this beautiful antique colour. But it also has the most beautiful flushing. As it moves in and out of flushes, you'll get this lovely burgundy and coppery edge to the plant as well. The whole plant changing colour with bright scarlet red growth tips and huge sprays of flowers. A really very impressive rose. I think bred by Dixon off the top of my head in the late 80s, early 90s. A really lovely one and utterly scrumptious it is too. So great for growing in shade, receiving between 4, maybe 5 hours of direct sunlight per day. Also small and manageable, coming up to around 3 to 3.5 feet, and good for growing in a pot. So it's a plus on this one. Seeing this one seated well within the new top 50 for 2025 and great for growing in shade is truly scrumptious. So this list is in no particular order. We've then got the Crown Princess Margarita from David Austin Roses. Now, this one, unfortunately, very disappointingly, now retired here in the UK. Quite upset about this one. This is a really useful rose, and again, fits into the same category as, again, for instance, RNLI does. This one will come up to almost a sort of a sub-shrub or sub-climber. You can grow this one, receiving just 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. It will flower beautifully and produce large sprays of informal flowers all the way through the summer months, again, right into the very back end of the season. Once again, producing great hips, and it has an amazing fragrance to boot. Do look out. Oh, it's just lovely. Do look out for my full personal review for Crown Princess Margarita. This one has been seated well within the top 20 for several years in a row now and is going nowhere very quickly. This one you will be able to find grown under its Latin name, no longer under license by David Austin Roses. So do look out for this one. Keep searching. It is very much worth growing. And if I find this one grown by anybody in a particular stockist here in the UK, I will of course signpost you to this one. But it is widely available through Europe and of course in America. So great for growing in shade. I'll bring that one close into the camera for you. Those lovely blooms. I think this one fell on the sword with David Austin, not only because of its date of introduction, but also to make way in their collections for Bring Me Sunshine, which is quite comparable to this one. However, it needs full sunshine. Crown Princess Margarita doing really well in deep shade and just receiving 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. This one also cuts really well. By really well, it was going to last about 3 or 4 days in a vase, which is not too bad for a David Austin Roses, but this one is a really nice one. Crown Princess Margarita. So I've been joined by a little spider. Let's put that one back on there. Right, next up, this one is actually not in flower, but I wanted to bring this one to you in hip. Now, producing really very lovely hips indeed, and again from David Austin Roses, this one is Immigen. On my comparable for white roses, Immigen is great for growing in deep shade, receiving just 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. A very strange shaped shrub from David Austin. Very upright and conical in its, what's the word, stands up like a column, up to about 5 feet. You can see produces really great hips. These will swell and go brilliant red and orange during the winter months. Absolutely fabulous for adding to a floral arrangement. Imogen produces really lovely sort of lime green whitish flowers all the way through the summer months. I've got mine paired with Persicaria red dragon in the garden, and that stark contrast between purple red foliage and those beautiful creamy white flowers is really lovely during the summer months. But it's doing really well in deep shade, receiving just 4 hours of direct sunlight per day, coming up quite tall to about 5 feet in height. Immigen also great for growing in shade. Right, in the new format of this particular video, but appearing on screen off to my right now, should be Port Sunlight from David Austin Roses. Again, making it onto several of these best of collections. Great for growing in a pot and also great for growing in deep shade. A lovely little apricot flower, around 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter, with a lovely cute lime green button eye in the very centre. Very popular through America. That one does very well here in the garden. Been very open and honest in my personal personal review for Port Sunlight is it nearly didn't make it to this particular property. Obviously, many of you will know that I actually brought around 840 plants with me from our last garden when we moved to North Lodge 8 years ago. It was a massive and monstrous, great big task. Port Sunlight wasn't particularly a rose that I particularly liked, but was one my husband really adored. So I brought just one plant for him. Now I had 3 in the last garden, so whoever's occupying our last cottage should have 2 in their garden. But I brought one Port Sunlight here, and instead of planting it in full sun like I had at our last garden, I planted it in very deep shade here on the east-facing side of our thatched cottage, where it receives very little light per day. Just about 4 hours of direct sunlight very early on. So during the winter, plunged into complete darkness. It gets very little light there at all during the dormant season. Is very tough. So Port Sunlight, great for growing in very deep shade, receiving just 4 or 5 hours of direct sunlight per day, making it great, and a very small compact plant, making it great also for growing in a pot. For instance, if you had an east-facing door and you wanted a rose in a pot next to your front or back door with maybe an overhang from a porch or a porticade, that's a really good way of growing a rose. That one will take that quite nicely. So appearing on the screen right next to me at the moment should be Port Sunlight. This rose, reviewed by myself during 2025. The review for this one only available to paying membership subscription holders only until the end of January 2025. Heavily related to iceberg. This one is Burgundy Ice, and obviously you can see where it gets its name from. I say heavily related to one of the world's fastest and biggest selling roses, iceberg. Burgundy Ice is its burgundy counterpart, a really lovely flower, producing great big sprays up to about 3 to 3.5 feet high of these beautiful magenta burgundy pink flowers all the way through the summer months. These ones a little bit battered by the rain, but Burgundy Ice, great for growing in almost 4 hours to 5 hours of direct sunlight per day. Very disease resistant. This one is a really good rose and widely available from a multitude of stockists throughout the world. This one is Burgundy Ice. The review for that one being made available to the wider audience on my channels at January 2026. However, if you wanted to become a paying for membership subscription holder anywhere, either on Instagram, YouTube or TikTok, it unlocks a whole new level of videos from myself. There is exclusive videos on all sorts of subjects, and as a paying membership subscription holder, you also get to request the videos that you want to see. So if there's a particular topic that you want covered, please do consider purchasing yourself a membership subscription for as little as £3. For as little as £3, you can gain access to the full back catalogue, watch all the videos, pay 1 month, and if you wanted to, you can unsubscribe. It's as simple as that. But as a membership subscription holder, you do get to actually request content from myself, and I will more than happily make you content for you to watch on your chosen platform, whether that's Instagram, YouTube or TikTok. Right, moving on, a rose that should now be appearing next to me on the screen, an informal shrub or short climber, an old rose called Buff Beauty. I think bred in around 1939. That's an absolutely exquisite apricot rose, which I fell in love with at a local National Trust property, Mottisfont, which used to actually hold the national collection of roses before it moved up to David Austin Roses in Shropshire. Buff Beauty, a really lovely rose. I say you can grow that one as an informal shrub reaching around 5 feet, or as I do here at North Lodge, I actually grow it as a short climber. It needs a little bit of help standing up if it gets over 5 feet tall, so I planted it against the wall on the cottage here. I've got 2 either side of the French doors, and it is an absolute cracker. Also producing great hips. It flushes burgundy red at the beginning and end of every season, but produces wave upon wave of beautiful apricot flowers all the way through the summer months. So please don't disregard it because it's an old rose. There's going to be several of them appearing on this collection as we move forward. And I've got people say, I would like a modern rose, I'd like a new rose. Don't disregard some of these older roses, because these are the ones that are actually making up the heritage and the breeding stocks that many actual rose breeders have actually used in the past to bring us our modern cultivars. So Buff Beauty, not one to be disregarded because of its age of introduction. Right, we also have another one for you today. This one, again from David Austin Roses, is LD Braithwaite, one of the darkest roses or red roses still available in the David Austin collection. And I brought this one, and you're probably thinking, Ben, why have you brought that one to us looking like that? It's not a particularly great specimen, but LD Braithwaite will actually thrive in very deep shade indeed. I've got mine planted once again in the same border as Port Sunlight, which should have appeared on screen for you when I mentioned that one. But LD Braithwaite coming up nice and tall, about 5 feet tall, but really growing very well in deep shade. And I think heavily related to the newer Dannahue, this huge foliage, meaning it can obviously harvest a huge amount of energy from the sun. Something to look out for on LD Braithwaite is it's not particularly weather resistant. And I mentioned this in my personal review, which if you're watching along on YouTube will actually follow this actual best of collection afterwards. All the reviews will follow on. So just keep watching the playlist for all the videos to move through afterwards. But it has a really weak neck. And if you'll find it, if LD Braithwaite is caught in a heavy summer rainstorm, all of the flowers will fall off and they will snap. I'm going to do it for you now. They'll do that. And you'll go out into the garden and you'll find them all hanging on the plants as if someone's gone off and snapped them. And it's not the fact they've snapped them, they've just broken under the sheer weight of water that catches in the flower, because it holds the bloom upwards and say very, very shallow cup holding those flowers up, where the water gets stuck in them and it breaks the neck and they all stand down like this. So if you are growing LD Braithwaite, which does very well in deep shade, receiving about 4 hours of direct sunlight per day, and you know you're going to get a heavy rainstorm, please do go out into the garden and cut these. They do last in a vase for several days. They do work quite nicely, but they will produce, I say, they'll all snap off in the rain, which is really quite upsetting. So now I've done that, I'm going to put that one up on the ladder behind me. So great for going in deep shade on an east or maybe a north facing aspect is LD Braithwaite. Right, working our way down, another rose that now should be appearing on screen next to me, available from Peter Beals and fully reviewed during 2025, is Tickled Pink. A lovely, strong candy pinked rose with a very, very good fragrance. Lovely one for growing in a pot or in a fairly deep shade, receiving between 4 and 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. So appearing next to me right now should be Tickled Pink. Another rose which will also be popping up here, also alongside me right now, is one reviewed by myself twice. Reviewed for subscription-based content in its year of launch during 2024 and 2023, and now fully reviewed and smashing its way into the very, very top of my top 20 or my top 50 this year in 2025, exclusively bred by Peter Beals, is the Oxford Physics Rose. A fabulous rose, which unfortunately is not in flower for you today, but appearing next to me on screen now. A really large and substantial shrub, starting flowering really early on in the season and flowering all the way through in succession after succession. Now, I only deadheaded that one a couple of days ago, and I'm really kicking myself. I probably took off flowers that I could bring to you in today's video. But that rose, again, great fragrance, great disease resistance, a beautiful, open, light pink flower, flushed with yellow and apricot. A little bit of insider information, that rose will once again be appearing on another collection which I'm going to be reworking for you this year. My Best for Hips collection, already producing great big swollen hips, which I've left on the plant, and it's still nonetheless actually producing more flushes of flowers. So a huge, great big fast repeat on Oxford Physics, capable of growing in 4, 5 and 6 hours of direct sunlight per day on an exposed site and with great disease resistance, and on a rough or poor soil. So if you've got particularly rough soil, maybe you've moved into a new build house with lots of builder's rubble about, or you've got a particularly free draining soil like us here at North Lodge, we're growing on a gravel based soil, Oxford Physics is a really, really good one for you to look out for. So making it onto this collection today and appearing on screen next to me should be Oxford Physics. Another one by Peter Beals appearing now, and another great rose with a multitude of uses. Flowering very early on in the season, producing great hips with great disease resistance, but unfortunately lacking a little bit of fragrance, is Ivors Rose. This one starting its show, it flowers very early on the season. I'm going to bring it out close so you can see the beautiful colour of Ivors Rose. Again, producing burgundy red foliage before and after its flushes of flowers and very early on in the season. Again, a useful plant for planting alongside a rose arch, much as we talked about RNLI, cladding the sides of a rose arch. If you've ended up with a rose all the way at the top of an arbor, or you want to grow this one on a pillar or a post, this one will come up to about 5 or 6 feet if you wanted to. Actually, the particular spray of flowers this one's taken off was about my height, and I've photographed it underneath one of my olives just a couple of days ago. Huge sprays of flowers produced all the way through the summer months and into the very back end of September and into October. But it's its ability to stretch up, if you wanted it to about 6 feet in height, which make it perfect for cladding the size of a rose arch, but really doing very, very well in fairly decent shade, getting about 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. It's the very beautiful Ivors Rose from Peterbilt. Right, next up, well, another one from Peterbilt. We're having a little cluster from them right now. They're revered as being one of the best roses that Peterbilt have ever launched. This one is McMillan Nurse. I'm going to bring this very darling little rose close into the camera and ignore the close-up of me here. This one is a really lovely rose, only reaching around 2'6" in height. So once again, fitting into that very, very difficult category of growing in a pot and growing in decent shade. Receiving anywhere between 4 and 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. You can also grow this one in full sun if you wanted to. Be aware, if you grow it in far too much sun, these beautiful alabaster creamy white flowers will actually burn and fry in the sun. But producing really large sprays, let's get this out so you can see it, large sprays of flowers, very much like an old rose with a shallow cup, sprays of flowers opening from beautiful apricot and yellow tinged buds, little blooms measuring around 2.5 to 3 inches across. McMillan Nurse will flower all the way through the summer months. Huge sprays of flowers and literally encrusting the plant. Say very, very small shrub, reaching just around 2'6" in height and around 2'6" wide. McMillan Nurse is an absolute cracker of a plant. I think bred and introduced in 1998. Of every single penny of profit from this particular rose has gone straight to the McMillan charity, the cancer charity, since its year of launch, and will continue to do so. That is a lifetime commitment from Peterbilt. So lots and lots of money going to a very, very good cause. Same as I believe, I need to check my facts on that one. Same as I believe with RNLI, that is a lifetime guarantee of the profits going for that particular rose straight to the RNLI charity. But anyway, making it onto my best for growing in shade collection, one of the best roses ever bred by Peterbilt Roses, an absolute little cracker. This rose, incidentally, the fragrance. Oh, I love this. It smells. You can see it's got my taste buds going. This one smells of freshly baked cake, a Victoria sandwich sponge. That lovely notes of vanilla and sponge cake, which is obviously why I've said it gets my taste buds rather than my nose, my fragrance going. But yeah, a really, really lovely one from Peterbilt. That one is McMillan Nurse. Right, another old rose up for you next. This one, a small, informal, rambling rose or climbing rose. I think this one is classified as a rambler. This one is Blush Noisette, fully reviewed by myself way back in 2022, 2023. Again, if you're watching this video on YouTube and you're interested, all of the videos that are all the personal reviews for these roses will continue to roll on after this particular best of collection. Blush Noisette, great for growing in fairly decent shade. Mine getting just about 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. Planted between two stands of trees. Behind it on the east side, giving it shade, it's a large stand of trees which occupy the area between us and the road. And in front of it are huge weeping willow. This grows really nicely on my rose arch, producing great big sprays of informal flowers. Now, I've often talked about this one. Great for bringing into an informal floral arrangement in a pot, in a vase in the house, where this brings a lovely informal edge. The fragrance on Blush Noisette. Oh, it's peppery, it's woody. You've got notes of sandalwood and cloves there. It's warm and it's spicy with notes of myrrh. It's a really, really lovely rose. I'm going to take this out and get drip water all over the floor. I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Virtually thornless, so perfect for growing on an east or a north facing wall, maybe around a window in a high traffic area where you don't want a lot of thorns. Blush Noisette, an old rose, but absolutely cracking, making it on for my best for shade collection. Right, we've got a few more ahead of us now. I always break into a sweat when I say this one. I've got a spray of flowers on this one now. This one is a rambling rose, an old rambling rose, Ghislaine de Féligonde. Hopefully, I've got that one right, and everybody who speaks French is not going to come for me. It's always difficult doing these things, but a really beautiful informal rose. Great for growing in fairly decent shade, receiving around 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight per day. You can grow this one in several different ways, and I mentioned this in my personal review. You can either grow this one as a large informal shrub. If you give it some space, maybe in the middle of a lawn, this will produce a very large and rambling shrub. It will sort of cascade and fall all over the place, reaching around 5 or 6 feet in height. If you wanted to plant this one, for instance, leaning against an outbuilding, maybe you wanted to cover the size of an ugly shed in the garden, absolutely great for that. It will sort of tumble over the top. I've also got this one growing on an east-facing fence panel here in the garden. Again, once again, underneath the shade of a tree. So it's an east-facing fence with a large foxglove tree above it, flowering still beautifully. Ghislaine de Féligonde bringing out lovely tones of apricot, pink and peach in huge sprays of flowers. Mine normally produces two very distinctive flushes of flowers and produces very, very lovely and very different shaped hips during the autumn and winter months. And the hips are really very, I can't describe to you how beautiful they are. Maybe actually I'll insert them into the video here. Maybe I'll do that. I'll have to remember to do that when I do the editing on this particular one. But the hips on Ghislaine de Féligonde are really lovely. They're tiny. They're about the size of my little fingernail, only about 6 or 7 millimeters in diameter. They really are beautiful, and they're held really nicely. So great for working into a Christmas arrangement, or maybe inserting into a Christmas wreath if you wanted to bring natural things into your festive arrangements in December. But this one is Ghislaine de Féligonde. And you'll probably notice the pronunciation of that one's changed probably 3 or 4 times since I said that. So please don't be angry with me. I do try. Right, next up for you and appearing on screen, this one is Valentine Heart, a really adorable, very, very highly fluted rose. Now, I described this one in my personal review as having a tulip-like flower. So the tops of the flowers open very much, if I was going to draw a comparison to another rose, very similar to that, for instance, of Golden Celebration. The flowers on the top are highly fluted edges, all the way around the top, giving it a really nice informal look. Flowers, beautiful, soft pink, and the great rose for bringing into your garden. For instance, it also makes onto my commemorative collection as well, to gifting for someone for maybe a special anniversary, maybe a Valentine's Day gift, or for just expressing some love. Valentine Heart is a really lovely one. That one, again, once again available from English Roses. I haven't got the next rose up for you either. So appearing on screen after Valentine Heart should now be Bonica. Now also smashing its way right into the very, very top of my brand new top 50. Bonica fallen out of fashion here in the UK because of its extensive use in amenity and car park planting used by councils all over the UK. It's a very hard-working and resilient rose, which you should not completely disregard because of its age of breeding, because it comes out of the 80s, and you shouldn't disregard it because it's planted in car parks. It is a fabulous rose that will flower and flower and flower, massive sprays. Please do watch my personal review of Bonica, because you'll see just how big those sprays of flowers are, often over a foot, coming on 15-16 inches long, containing quite literally hundreds of flowers. Now, if you planted that one in deep shade, receiving 4 or 5 hours of direct sunlight per day, Bonica will flower nonetheless, and it will also cascade and tumble down banks over the top of walls. Great for drift planting. If you've got an area in the garden you want to fill relatively cheaply, buy 5 or 6 Bonicas and plant them in a large group. Give them about 4 feet distance between the centres that you plant them, and it will literally just engulf the area. And once again, whether you deadhead it or not, will still produce masses of hips all the way through the winter months as well. So please do consider Bonica if you have an area in the garden. Again, once again, making it onto my fairy tale collection. That rose a lovely sense of whimsy and movement on the flowers, those lovely big sprays of informal pink flowers, gracing it all the way through the summer months. Right, a rose I've decided to bring you in hip today but also by occupying this best for shade collection in its original format is Roald Dahl. And I brought this to you in HIP because very interesting. Roald Dahl, now we're at the very end of August, moving into September. I've stopped deadheading my roses. I want to bring you much more content on hips. Roses will continue to produce lots of flowers all the way through the end of the year, but possibly into the end of October. But you can see here on the same growth, Roald Dahl not only producing more flowers, but also bearing really lovely hips. Great for growing in deep shade. Once again, mine in the garden is planted receiving just 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. Has very, very light, fresh green foliage and also does well in a pot. So a multitude of different aspects for Roald Dahl. A really lovely little rose. But these ones, these hips will swell and turn a lovely golden red colour towards the back end of September and October, but still producing flowers now. Roald Dahl producing a very small and shallow cupped flower in a lovely, deep, rich apricot all the way from the end of June, continuously flowering now all the way through to the very end of September and into October. A fabulous little rose from David Austin Roses, which unfortunately sliding slightly out of my top 20, but still ranking well within my new top 50. Right, the last rose, making up 20 in total, is an ex-number 1 ranked rose with myself, taking my number 1 spot 2 years in a row and thriving in really deep shade. Unfortunately discontinued directly by David Austin Roses, but now available for a multitude of other sites and widely available through Europe and for America, is the stunning Lady Emma Hamilton, which has very similar foliage to Dannahue, a burnt burgundy edge rose. That one really only finding its feet. It should be appearing next to me on screen now. It's only really finding its feet towards the back end of June, July, and then large flushes of very highly scented, beautiful apricot, burnt orange flowers right through to the very, very back end of September, October, and if you're lucky, sometimes November. That rose really only unseated from its number 1 position by Silas Marner. I think during 2023, Silas Marner dislodged the Lady Emma Hamilton from its number 1 spot, which it held 2 years in a row. Now that rose very, very strongly competitive. Now only rose to have held the position for 2 years in a row, only now being superseded by Bring Me Sunshine, holding its number 1 spot for a little longer than that. But the last rose in this collection, making up 20 roses which thrive in deep shade, receiving between 4 and 6 hours of direct sunlight. There's 20 roses on this collection. Please do consider continuing to watch, if you're on YouTube, the videos, the personal reviews for all of these roses, including their fragrance rating, their disease resistance rating, their thorn counts, all now following on this particular video. Thank you very much for joining me for my Best for Shade collection. I will see you all again very soon. I'm the Gardener Ben. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.